Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we will be discussing about the steps of the HMP Shunt pathway, the regulation of the HMP Shunt pathway, and the significance of the HMP Shunt pathway. So let's begin. Let's start with some interesting facts. It is called as the monophosphate pathway because unlike glycolysis, which involves the bisphosphates, this pathway includes monophosphates. It is called as the pentose phosphate pathway because the reactions involve the intermediate formation of the pentose phosphates. It is the direct oxidative pathway because the first carbon atom of the glucose is liberated as the carbon dioxide during the oxidation process. Approximately 10% of the glucose molecules per day enter this pathway. It is highly active in the liver and RBCs, which metabolize about 30% of their glucose via the HMP shunt. The primary goal of this pathway is the generation of reduced NADP, that is NADPH. Coming to the overview of the pathway, it is divided into two phases. The first is the oxidative phase, where 2 NADPH and 1 pentose phosphate are formed with the liberation of 1 carbon dioxide. The second phase is the non-oxidative phase, where the pentose phosphate formed is converted back into the intermediates of glycolysis. Coming to the step 1, that is the oxidation of the glucose 6-phosphate. Oxidation of the glucose 6-phosphate gives rise to 6-phosphogluconolactone by the enzyme glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. This reaction requires NADP+ as the coenzyme and magnesium as the cofactor. The NADP+ is reduced to produce the first molecule of NADPH in this pathway. The first step is the most crucial step as it is the rate limiting step of the entire HMP shunt pathway. So this is the step 1. The step 2 is the hydrolysis of the 6-phosphogluconolactone. Here, the 6-phosphogluconolactone hydrolysis gives rise to 6-phosphogluconic acid, also known as 6-phosphogluconate, catalyzed by the enzyme gluconolactone hydrolase. It is the addition of water molecule to cleave open the lactone ring. This is the hydrolysis. Now step 3 is the oxidative decarboxylation, which is the final reaction of the oxidative phase, completing the generation of NADPH and producing a pentose sugar. So let's see what happens. The 6-phosphogluconic acid is dehydrogenated to form a transient intermediate compound called as 3-keto-6-phosphogluconate, and it is catalyzed by the enzyme 6-phosphogluconate dehydrogenase. Here, NADP+ acts as the coenzyme and magnesium acts as a cofactor. And finally, an NADPH is formed. The 3-keto-6-phosphogluconate, that is the intermediate which is formed, is very unstable and spontaneously undergoes decarboxylation. Finally, forms the 5-carbon sugar molecule, that is the ribulose 5-phosphate. So, at the end of the oxidative phase, from one molecule of glucose 6-phosphate, we get 2 NADPH, 1 carbon dioxide molecule, and 1 pentose phosphate. After the oxidative phase generates the ribulose 5-phosphate, the pathway enters the non-oxidative phase. That is, now we are talking about non-oxidative phase. Here, the pentose phosphates are converted into intermediates of glycolysis. The fourth step is the isomerization and epimerization. Ribulose 5-phosphate undergoes structural rearrangements. It serves as a substrate for 2 different enzymes, resulting in 2 distinct 5-carbon sugar phosphates. In isomerization, a portion of the ribulose 5-phosphate is isomerized to form ribose 5-phosphate, and it is catalyzed by the enzyme phosphopentose isomerase. Now coming to the other reaction, that is in epimerization, another portion of the ribulose 5-phosphate is epimerized to form xylulose 5-phosphate by the enzyme phosphopentose epimerase. The fifth step is the first transketolase reaction. This step involves the transfer of a 2-carbon unit from a donor molecule to an acceptor molecule. The donor molecule here is the xylulose 5-phosphate, a ketose molecule, and the acceptor is the ribose 5-phosphate, an aldose molecule. This results in the formation of pseudoheptulose 7-phosphate, a 7-carbon sugar, and glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, a 3-carbon sugar. The reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme transketolase, and transketolase requires thiamine pyrophosphate as the coenzyme. The clinical application here is that transketolase depends on thiamine pyrophosphate, which in turn depends on thiamine levels. Therefore, measuring the transketolase activity will tell us the status of the vitamin B1 levels. This enzyme is measured in the RBCs. The sixth step is the Transaldolase reaction. This step involves the transfer of a 3-carbon unit this time. 3-carbon unit from a donor to an acceptor molecule. The 3-carbon unit from pseudoheptulose 7-phosphate is transferred to glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and the reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme transaldolase. This transfer will result in the formation of 2 new sugar phosphates, a 4-carbon sugar called as erythrose 4-phosphate and a 6-carbon sugar called as fructose 6-phosphate are formed at the end of transaldolase reaction. The seventh step is a second transketolase reaction. In this step, there is a transfer of 2-carbon unit. Again, this time it is 2-carbon unit. A 2-carbon unit is transferred from another xylulose 5-phosphate to erythrose 4-phosphate formed in the previous step, and the reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme transketolase. It results in the formation of fructose 6-phosphate and glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, and as usual, transketolase needs thiamine pyrophosphate as the coenzyme. Now coming to the final step of the non-oxidative phase, which essentially connects the intermediates generated in the previous steps back to the beginning of this pathway or allows them to enter glycolysis. The reaction involves condensation. 2 molecules of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate formed in the 5th step and 7th step. They condense to form 1 molecule of fructose 6-phosphate. Now this reaction is followed by isomerization, where the newly formed fructose 6-phosphate along with the ones formed in the 6th step and the 7th step are isomerized to glucose 6-phosphate. By regenerating the glucose 6-phosphate, the pathway completes a cycle. The regenerated glucose 6-phosphate can either re-enter the oxidative phase of the HMP shunt to produce more NADPH, or it can be shunted into the standard glycolytic pathway depending on the immediate metabolic needs of the cell. Now coming to the regulation of the HMP shunt pathway. The primary site of regulation is the first reaction of the oxidative phase, that is the glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase, that is the enzyme that catalyzes the rate limiting step. Now regulation by the substrate or product availability, that is the allosteric control, is the first substrate is the NADPH. It acts as a strong competitive inhibitor of the glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme. That means higher NADPH levels will lower the HMP pathway. The next substrate is the NADP+. Higher NADP+ activates the HMP pathway. The oxidative phase is directly controlled by the cellular levels of NADP+. So higher the NADP+, higher the HMP shunt pathway. The non-oxidative pathway is primarily controlled by the cellular requirements of the pentoses. If more pentoses are needed, HMP will increase. Then finally coming to hormonal regulation. The hormone insulin, it induces the synthesis of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme. So first is the rate limiting enzyme, second is the substrates like NADPH, NADP+, and third is the hormonal regulation, that is insulin. This is how the HMP shunt pathway is regulated. Now coming to the significance of the HMP shunt pathway. Unlike the glycolysis, the HMP shunt is not utilized for the energy production. ATP is neither utilized nor produced by this pathway. Instead, the primary physiological purpose of the HMP shunt is to generate critical cellular components like NADPH, which is required for the reductive biosynthesis and the antioxidant defense mechanisms. Ribose and deoxyribose synthesis also. It is required for the synthesis of nucleotides. The oxidative phase of the pathway is highly active in the organs like liver, adipose tissue for fatty acid synthesis. In RBCs, they are highly dependent on the HMP shunt to generate the NADPH. This NADPH is crucial for keeping the glutathione in a reduced state, which neutralizes the free radicals and maintains the erythrocyte membrane integrity and prevents the hemolysis. All these mechanisms we will be discussing in the later slides in detail. Then finally, oxidative phase can also occur in the lens of the eye. Here, it is required to preserve the lens transparency. In fact, the lens of the eye contains the maximum concentration of NADPH. The non-oxidative phase occurs in all the tissues because ribose synthesis is needed everywhere, which is essential for DNA or RNA synthesis. Now the second one is free radical scavenging. Free radicals such as the superoxide anion and hydrogen peroxide, they are continuously generated as the byproducts of the normal cellular metabolism. If left unchecked, these highly reactive molecules will destroy the essential molecules including the DNA, proteins, fatty acids, and ultimately leads to cellular destruction. Therefore, the cells utilize a coordinated multi-enzyme system to safely inactivate these free radicals. The enzyme superoxide dismutase first converts the highly reactive superoxide radicals into hydrogen peroxide and oxygen, and then the enzyme glutathione peroxidase converts the hydrogen peroxides into harmless water. This reaction requires reduced glutathione, GSH. Reduced glutathione is represented as GSH. The reduced glutathione as a donor molecule. During the reaction, the reduced glutathione is converted into its oxidized form. Reduced form is represented as GSH and oxidized form as GSSG. For the peroxidase enzyme to continue working, the supply of the reduced glutathione must be constantly replenished, which needs the glutathione reductase enzyme, as it converts the oxidized form to reduced form. But for the glutathione reductase to function, it needs NADPH, and this is where the HMP Shunt pathway is significant in free radical scavenging. Now the next one is the prevention of RBC lysis. The RBC membrane is constantly exposed to oxidative stress, and the HMP Shunt pathway provides a defense mechanism against it. Let's see how does that happen. The free radicals generated inside the RBCs are neutralized by the reduced glutathione, which needs NADPH to replenish the reduced form. The NADPH are produced by the HMP Shunt pathway. Hence, the RBC membrane integrity is intact. Now look at the right half of the diagram. So what happens in the G6PD deficiency? In G6PD deficiency, NADPH is not produced in sufficient quantities, because of which the RBC membrane cannot be protected from the damage to the lipid membranes due to the oxidative stress, which can be from infections or anti-malarial drugs or ingestion of fava beans, leading to cell lysis, resulting in the hemolytic anemia. The oxidative stress also damages the intracellular hemoglobin, leading to its denaturation and the formation of characteristic inclusions known as Heinz bodies. The fourth significance is it protects the oxygen transport. That is, the next role is protecting the oxygen transport in the body. Now, how is this happening? The NADPH generated helps in maintaining the ferrous state of the iron, that is the reduced state of the iron. This is needed for normal functioning of the hemoglobin. If G6PD is deficient and the HMP shunt doesn't produce enough NADPH, the iron will get converted into the oxidized ferric form. The hemoglobin with the ferric form is called methemoglobin. The methemoglobin cannot bind to the oxygen and carry it to the tissues. Interestingly, even though the methemoglobin is elevated in the bloodstream of these patients, visible clinical signs of inadequate tissue oxygenation such as cyanosis may not always be manifested. That is, the cyanosis paradox is seen in these conditions. The next is the detoxification of the drugs. Drugs are metabolized in the liver by the microsomal P450 enzymes. These enzymes use NADPH as the coenzyme and cause detoxification by causing hydroxylation. By adding the hydroxyl groups, they make the drugs more water soluble and easily excreted. In the absence of NADPH, all this mechanism fails. Hence, HMP shunt is also involved in detoxification of drugs. So coming to the next significance, HMP shunt pathway, it provides support to the immune system, particularly in the ability of the macrophages to destroy the phagocytosed bacteria. NADPH is strictly required by these immune cells to produce highly toxic reactive oxygen species. which are then used as a weapon to kill the bacteria. And the process by which the reactive oxygen species are produced is called as respiratory burst. It is the rapid consumption of oxygen by the cell to produce the reactive oxygen species. Then NADPH oxidase uses the NADPH to reduce the oxygen produced to superoxide anion radical. Superoxide dismutase will convert the superoxides into hydrogen peroxide. Finally, myeloperoxidases, they convert the hydrogen peroxide and the chloride ions to produce hypochlorous acid. This hypochlorous acid is the one that kills the engulfed bacteria. This is how HMP shunt pathway is helping in bactericidal activity. Once NADPH is produced, that NADPH is used to reduce the oxygen to form superoxide radicals. Then superoxide dismutase converts these radicals into hydrogen peroxide. The hydrogen peroxide combines with the chloride ions to create the hypochlorous acid, which can kill the bacteria. This is the bactericidal activity. The maximum concentration of the NADPH in the entire human body is found within the lens of the eye. The primary function of this abundant NADPH is to preserve and maintain the transparency of the lens. So without adequate NADPH generated by the HMP shunt, the lens would lose its transparent quality. Hence, HMP shunt pathway is also significant in maintaining the transparency of the lens. So these are the 7 significances of the HMP shunt pathway. Now coming to the energetics of the HMP shunt pathway. The ATP is neither utilized nor produced by the reactions of the HMP shunt pathway. That is zero ATP production. The cells do not use the HMP pathway for energy production. NADPH is produced instead of NADH, like we see in the glycolysis or TCA cycle. NADH can enter the electron transport chain and generate the ATP, while NADPH cannot produce the ATP because it cannot enter the electron transport chain. That is the reason HMP shunt pathway cannot produce any ATP. Now, HMP shunt as a therapeutic target. The HMP pathway provides essential pentose phosphates, primarily the ribose 5-phosphate. These pentose phosphates are the fundamental building blocks of the DNA and RNA synthesis. Rapidly dividing cells, such as malignant cancer cells, they have high demand for DNA and RNA synthesis to support their continuous growth and replication. By pharmacologically targeting and inhibiting specific enzymes within the HMP shunt pathway, the drugs can effectively decrease the availability of these crucial pentose phosphates. Without adequate nucleotides, the rate of the cell proliferation is stopped. The pharmacological agents that disrupt these metabolic pathways are known as anti-metabolites, and they are widely used fundamental class of drugs in the modern cancer treatments. The non-oxidative phase of the HMP shunt has a direct and clinically important relationship with the thiamine levels in the body. The enzyme Transketolase is strictly dependent on thiamine pyrophosphate. Consequently, when an individual has thiamine deficiency, the overall activity of the Transketolase enzyme is significantly decreased. Because of this direct enzymatic dependence, clinicians utilize the HMP shunt for diagnostic purposes. The measurement of the Transketolase reaction, specifically in the RBCs, serves as a reliable and standard clinical index to evaluate the underlying thiamine status of a patient. A major clinical consequence of thiamine deficiency is Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. It is a severe encephalopathy, which is the most characteristically seen in the chronic alcoholics. This specific syndrome is due to a genetic defect in the enzyme Transketolase. The defect typically involves reduced binding affinity for the thiamine pyrophosphate. It means the enzyme requires much higher concentrations of the thiamine to function properly, making these individuals uniquely susceptible to thiamine deprivation. So this concludes the HMP shunt pathway, the steps, energetics, regulation, clinical significance. If you have understood the topic, do like the video, share it and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to watch the posts in the community tab of the channel for the updates. See you in the next one.